We cannot deny the relation of dreams to the realities of our waking lives, to our pasts and our futures. We need to excavate them just as we excavate archives and memories. We need to record them, speak them, and analyze them as part of our histories. This is why those dreamt during or in the years following the events become indispensable to their trans-relation. Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching Leaf by Leaf. Today, I'm excited to present this year's winner for the subscriber wildcard pick. If you don't know what that is, I started it last year in 2022. And in my first video of the year, I open it up for submissions, and everybody can submit one title that they would like me to read for that year and do a video on, of course. And last year's winner was Wolfgang Hilbig's Old Rendering Plant, which was astounding. This year's winner completely caught me off guard. I had never heard of this author, unfortunately. I had not heard of this title. The historical events that this book is born out of, I only had the smallest inkling because it's so far outside of the sphere of information that I'm exposed to on a daily basis. And so I am extremely grateful to Marcel Hidalgo 1076, who was the winner for this year, bringing me in touch with this unassuming powerhouse of a book, Trans-Relating House 1 by Poupeh Missaghi. This is out from Coffee House Press, by the way, a press that is becoming more and more one of my favorites. I first came to know of Coffee House Press because they started publishing my dear Ricky Ducournay. There was actually a new book of Ducournay's, The Platonist, that was just published a month or so ago. Go check it out, please. That's on the heel of Traffic, and before that, Bright Fellow. So she's got a handful of titles out with Coffee House Press. They also publish Brian Evanson and others. And so now we've got Trans-Relating House 1 by Poupeh Missaghi. And this book comes out of the author's culture and identity as an Iranian and as someone who was in Tehran in 2009 during the notorious riots that occurred as part of protests, as part of what is known as the Green Movement around those 2009 presidential elections. Of course, there's huge tension in the capital city of Iran between dissidents, between the government, between the Islamic Republic. There, of course, are those who are fighting for more human rights, women who are tired of being under oppressive regimes. What started as peaceful protests, of course, as they do, took a violent turn. And the author was there for these things, but the author is also someone whose first culture is Iranian. Her native language is Persian. Her thinking is in Persian. But she writes exclusively in English. She is also a translator into Persian, and she's translated many different authors into Persian, including Roberto Bolaño, who has a major presence in this book. In fact, explicitly cited, and most salient, I would say, would be the part about the victims, the part about the bodies from, or the part about the crimes, sorry, from 2666. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here. But in any case, this really delves into the victims of that moment in history. I think that one of the examples I can give that was the most impactful on me was with Zara Ranavard. And I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that, but this is the wife of the Green Movement leader Mir Hossein Mousavi. And in this page, the very last paragraph tells us that Ranavard and Mousavi were put under house arrest in February 2011. In February 2019, they are still under house arrest. No trial has been held. Now, I got curious about some of these figures and about these 2009 protests and about the Green Movement. And so I took to Wikipedia, and I quickly learned why we need to really question and be on guard about certain media. And Wikipedia said that the house arrest for Ranavard ended on May 2018. And I was like, so wait a minute, is the author of this book, is Missaghi deliberately, twisting facts to make me go and seek things out? Because that's a major point of the book, is to ask questions, to be curious, to be provoked into learning more, into diving deeper into these things, to be skeptical of media. I then went and just Googled and found an Amnesty International statement that was released on February 4th, 2021. So this would be 3 years after the Wikipedia article says that the house arrest ended for Ranavard. And this statement on Amnesty International was posted on the 10th anniversary of the house arrest that was still in effect, which would put it at 2021, and asking Iranian authorities to end this unlawful detention. So I quickly had a little mini lesson that the book provoked, where I saw, hey, I don't know what's going on with that Wikipedia article, but that house arrest never ended as it says it did. And then just a couple of pages after all of that went down while I was reading, we get to one of these sections of this multi-layered novel that I'll talk about in a moment, where we get this litany of questions. And some of the questions are, how much of what is deemed fact is fiction? How much of fiction is fact? When an event has come to an end and only reverberations remain, can a hard line really be drawn between the two? And so this is something that comes up a lot on this channel. And in my video, I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it's like 31 books on writing. One of them is from Leland Reichen, and he says that fiction is more truthful than facts, because facts just tell us what is, and fiction tells us how it is. And so let me back up a little bit and tell you how this novel is put together, because it's pretty amazing. I also want to give a testament not to my powers of perception as a reader, but to the powers of just how well crafted this novel is, just how well wrought the author's intentions are through language and form and content is on the part of Missaghi. And when I first saw this and I saw the title on this cover, and I saw that transrelating had re in parentheses there in the middle so that it can be read as translating, relating, transrelating, meaning not just the interpretation, but changing something. It's this very ever-shifting relational paradigm that's being set forth here in just this one interestingly grammatized word here. And so I flipped through, as I do in books like this, to see how much further this would be taken. I expected it to be kind of littered with a Arno Schmittian word and syntax play, but alas, that is not the intention of this book. And in fact, the parenthetical transrelating of different words only occurs in a couple of key words like transrelating and histories. But what I did notice when I was flipping through is that the format of the text changes very frequently. And it wasn't until I was a few pages into it that I said to myself in my brain voice, it's as if this text is breathing, because there were pages that were single-spaced, alternating with pages that were double-spaced. And no sooner had I thought that the this is a breathing prose. The prose is alive. That on, I'm telling you, like one page later, on page 5, in almost towards the end of this tight paragraph, it says the text breathes, the text grows, the text decomposes. And I just thought, wow. And again, this isn't self-congratulation, self-aggrandizement on my part. It literally, as you flip through it, it looks as if it's inhaling and exhaling because of the way that it's formatted. And it was so, okay, it was affirming that I got to this part that said the text breathed shortly after I had that thought. But I think, again, I just want to put the light back on the author and just highlight how well Missaghi's desire to have prose that is alive came through. And what you'll see is that the single space portions, at least some of them, I'll get to the others in a second. The single space portions is the author's voice, the author as the creator of this text. And then the double spaced portions are the narrative. And so the narrative is about a woman in Tehran who gets interested in these statues, like public square statues that start to go missing. And so she kind of gets in this investigative journalist mode and is going all over the city to hookah lounges and dance clubs, nightclubs, bars, cafes, and so on, trying to track down different art curators and sculptors and people who may have more information about where these sculptures are going. And of course, as she's doing this, it's just a labyrinth that's leading to this awful minotaur that finally opens her eyes about the real missing bodies that are of importance that she needs to be chasing. And that's sort of the final closing and knell of the book. But it's almost as if those single space sections, when the author is talking about what she really wishes this character of hers would do, or what she could do with this character, it's like the author is inhaling. So these are inhalations. And then the narrative with the double spacing, more space in there, more airy, is the exhalation. And so that is very interesting to me and a great way to make the prose feel alive, to seem alive. But also the notion of narrative or character will. You see the author who, I mean, we know she can make the character do whatever she wants, but she imputes a will, free will, into the character. Then there are these journalistic excerpts that read like an obituary in an article, and these are somewhat modeled after Bolaño's part about the crimes in their clinical prose. But whereas Bolaño was getting all of this secondhand through journalist friends and newspapers and so on, I watched a talk with the author of this book, and she talks about how she was watching YouTube clips that people had posted directly from the midst of the riots, and she was literally just narrating things that she saw. And then this just brings in even more layering in terms of synthesizing data, in thinking of documentation. At any moment, these videos can be wiped out. But is it any more permanent now that it's been sort of transliterated into this book? It's transmuting. It's a work of alchemy, changing it from form to form. To take it even a step further, the author's sections are left justified and the narrative sections are right justified, which really threw me off for a second. I mean, it was apparent that it was right justified, and I wondered for a second, wait a minute, is this a deliberate design by the author, or is this a printing error or something? Sorry, Coffee House Press, for the doubt there. But then she actually, in one of the author stepping forward sections, she explains the right alignment. And it's interesting what she says. I want to read it. She says, as in regarding, the right alignment of the text, if you're curious. This is foreign territory. Its map needs to be foreign. I want it to make you stumble. I want you to be disrupted when you arrive here. Feel some discomfort. Feel out of place. The language of the city is Persian. My first language is Persian. Persian is written from right to left. I want to hold on to its presence, even if only as a ghost. I want to acknowledge the otherness of both the territory and the language to you, make them visible, and celebrate them as I translate the city of Tehran and its people into this other language of mine, meaning English. First of all, just the choice to make it right aligned to give it that feel of her native language of Persian made me think of Olga Tokarczuk's book, The Books of Jacob, where to give it that feel of the way Hebrew is written and the way Hebrew books are bound, it starts with like chapter 100 and works its way to chapter 1. This also made me think of the conversation between Michael Silverblatt and David Foster Wallace about Infinite Jest. And there were two observations that Michael made. He said something about, this book isn't difficulty for difficulty's sake. It's that it has to be difficult because something very difficult about the world is attempting to be explained. But then there's another comment that Michael Silverblatt makes about Infinite Jest that I think perfectly ties in with what Missaghi is doing in this book. And Silverblatt said, "But I wanted to suggest, at least for me, that the organization of the material, whether or not someone leaps up and says fractal, or even has heard of fractals, seemed to me to be necessary and beautiful because we're entering a world that needs to be made strange before it becomes familiar." You can feel this element of things being made strange so that they can become familiar. It's almost like a rite of passage for many of us. Myself, not knowing Persian, not being Iranian, not having been there in 2009, not being a woman, not being Islamic. It was especially jarring and disruptive, yet necessary. It was necessary, for example, for me to stumble over the structure of this book, made deliberately strange, so that I could see that part of what it's doing is finding a feminine language to speak out above the crowd of the masculine culture of Iran. For example, we get scenes where on public transportation there in Tehran, there are sections for men, of course, in the front and women in the back. And it made me think to myself, who is going to be Iran's Rosa Parks? There are so many connections between the human body and the city of Tehran. And it recalled what Vanessa Place does in La Medusa between the human brain, the structure, the anatomy of the human brain, and the city of Los Angeles. And so there's this multi-tiered taxonomy or hierarchy of human body, city, statues, and prose or language that's at play here. As if all this isn't enough, she also brings in her dream journal that apparently, according to the talk that I listened to, I gather she kept this dream journal as part of her dissertation work she was doing for her PhD. And this dream journal is brought in the form of a growing word cloud. And the two words that are largest, because they appeared most frequently in her dreams, are house and one. And as we carry through the novel, this word cloud just grows, or rather, we zoom in on it, and house one becomes very prominent. And when asked what house one means, this is, to Missaghi, the very first house that we know, the house of our childhood, the first home we have, which can be expanded beyond just our childhood home to, for her, Tehran. And so now she's looking across the long decades of temporal remove, back at that house one. And there's a huge element about dreams as the only real connective tissue we have that links us across the ages back to everything that has ever happened, whether it's documented or not. And so YouTube videos, books, journals, audio recordings, these can all be erased. Birth records can be erased. We see this strong cry against erasure as erasing an identity or even a whole people. Most recently, most poignantly, and most strongly, I think, in the work of Honoré Fanon Jeffers. But in the end, the one thing that, at least for now, can't be erased are our dreams. And so dreams become an important presence in this book. And she dips into the work of Freud, Jung, and Cixous. And those different critical studies and critical approaches to things are also brought in and inserted throughout the work. Dreams, she says, belong to a world still immune, a world that the men in power, those who surveil and censor, cannot yet touch, understand, control. A reminder that despite everything, there are still parts of ourselves that they cannot regulate or redact. I think Transrelating House 1 by Poupeh Missaghi is one of the most fervent memento moris I have ever encountered. It's a fervent memento mori and thus an exceedingly loud moment of silence. It's a book that I imagine I can't just slip back onto my shelf and let sit there silently. It will rattle and struggle and squirm and fight to be a reminder and to be heard, just like the suffering of all the families represented in this book. Truly a necessary and important book, done in such a way that proves the power of art is not dead.